gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So the mayoral primary, the Democratic primary, is coming up soon, June 24th, next month. And essentially the race for primary is between Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani. So Cuomo, formerly the governor of New York, now running to be the mayor, trying to make a political comeback. He is in the most favored position to win this primary. And then Zohran Mamdani, Democratic Socialist candidate from DSA, is the runner-up. So Zohran Mamdani has gotten a lot of attention on him, running a great campaign, great social media campaign, brings a great energy to all of his community activities, and just essentially has done a good job branding himself. And he has already raised so much money for the primary that it's enough. There's a cap on how much money can be raised, and he has reached that limit all through small dollar donations. So that's pretty impressive, and it's basically all just strategy at this point. So it was relatively late in the game that Cuomo decided he was going to throw his hat into the ring, and because he is a recognized figure in New York and viewed as competent, even though I would argue that's not really the case. So he is in the lead, I believe, with like 38%, and Zohran is significantly behind that, but still strong in second place. And Zohran has gained a lot of ground, and this is also not a sure thing for Cuomo, because he is a controversial figure. It depends on how much people are going to turn out, and it depends on how much Zohran's particular brand of socialism or democratic socialism, or just trying to find solutions for some of the problems that ail New York City. It's a testament to how attractive those policies are going to be, how much it's going to bring people out in the polls. This is New York. It's obviously a very left-leaning place. However, whether or not that left-leaning sentiment is enough to carry a candidate like Zohran across the finish line, or whether the most left-leaning people of New York are interested in voting at all, or the people that would need to turn out in an election to vote for Zohran Mamdani are interested in turning out at all, is really the question. And he did some interesting interviews with people in the streets. I think some of the first content that he put out there as part of his campaign was doing interviews with people that voted for Trump and AOC, or really just Trump, and talking to New Yorkers about why they voted for Trump, and particularly trying to get a sense for why people would vote for Trump and AOC on the same ballot, which did happen, I don't think like a huge amount in New York, but significantly. So it's a good example of how even in a pretty liberal-leaning place, one of the most liberal-leaning places in the country, because it's the biggest metropolitan city in the country, and metropolitan cities are always liberal and left-leaning. But even in a place like that, you have a lot of mixed opinions, and you've got odd ideas about Donald Trump, and you've certainly got odd ideas about socialism. That is simply an issue in America that needs to be addressed. I think that socialism, the absence of willingness to embrace certain socialist policies, is the reason that America has lost so much footing. And even without creating some kind of socialist utopian society, just embracing the elements of socialist practice that do work in America on a community level and on a federal level would, bring us up to speed with a lot of the other countries that are outpacing us. If they're not outpacing us in world power, they're certainly outpacing us in things like education and infrastructure. In other words, America at large seems to have some kind of allergy to socialism as a brand. And while people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and hopefully Zohran Mamdani have done a decent amount to chip away at that, it's still a large barrier that when it comes down to it, not so much on the details of the issues, not so much on how well the argument is made back and forth, but more so on a visceral level in terms of how people make their kind of gut level decisions, especially if they're not super engaged with, whatever they're voting on or whatever the decision is in front of them. A lot of the people in America who are going to cast their ballots, whether it's in New York or in a general election or some other election elsewhere, not necessarily going to be the most informed on the issues, probably making a decision more so on emotion. And while that could play to Cuomo's strengths in this primary, it also could play to Zohran's if there's enough excitement there. So one of the important things that needs to happen is for AOC to give him an endorsement. And do I think that it's impossible for him to win without that? No, but I think it would be a mess if she didn't. A lot of people would be upset at her. I think she's going to. She has a relationship with Brad Lander, who is the third runner-up in this election. And so just so people understand how this primary works, this is not how the general election works, I don't believe. But in the Democratic primary in New York, it's ranked choice voting. So that means you can list the people that you want to vote for rather than just voting for one. And if the person that you vote for, when enough votes have been counted to determine that they cannot win, that they have a small enough share of the votes that they will not win, those votes, rather than just being wasted on that candidate, go to the next person on the list. And so essentially this creates an effect where the people with the least amount of votes get knocked out of the race first, and then the secondary choices for those candidates end up counting towards whoever wins. So I think that that's a great way to, that's a great kind of voting structure to implement nationwide. So if this works well, if this election goes well in New York, I think it would go a long way to being a model for how, better, more socialist-friendly politicians can start to take more power and influence in America. And being the mayor of New York would be a great position for that. So, he's definitely got a tough race beating Cuomo. And Eric Adams dropped out of the Democratic primary to run as an independent. So that means whoever wins this Democratic primary is going to go up against Adams. And I guess whatever other significant candidates run as independents, which probably won't be any. I mean, Adams is the current mayor. He's very controversial. I think it's likely that he would lose to Cuomo. But either way, whether it's Cuomo or Zohran who wins, they're going to be going up against Adams in the general. So the biggest advantage that Zohran has here is that this is the Democratic primary, so the people who are going to be more activated to come out for that rather than the general election are going to potentially be people who are excited about a socialist candidate, excited to see some kind of shakeup in the Democratic Party. The number one thing that we have working against us is that people just do not take that much of an interest in the facts and, imaginative solutions. And the more people become engaged with facts and imaginative solutions, the more they recognize that pursuing some kind of socialist policy going forward is the only way to save a lot of lives in this country and create a more stable society. So AOC is one of few communicators who has been able to thread that needle to where people don't immediately discount her as some kind of unserious person, unscrupulous socialist, whatever, but rather take her very seriously as a person who brings light to important issues, who speaks on important issues, while also recognizing that she is sort of a beacon, forward, a way forward. And I think candidates who represent that, it's a coveted spot in politics to be the person who's viewed as the way forward. Kamala Harris's failure to spread that message about herself gave us Donald Trump. And so I think that there's a sense that, with what Zohran's up against, it could be a parallel of what we saw in the previous general election, where Kamala Harris loses to essentially somebody who represents all the worst elements of what a politician could be, while convincing people that he is different from that somehow. So it's the odd mind fuck of living in the Trump timeline. And hopefully Andrew Cuomo doesn't have that same type of juice. He does have the name recognition. I don't think he has quite the same level of charm, but I think, whether people view him as more competent than the socialist candidate is going to be kind of decisive here. And whether or not AOC endorses in time in this election, I think is going to go a long way. So when she endorsed Maya Wiley late in the game, she issued an endorsement for Maya Wiley very late in the election that Eric Adams ended up winning. People were upset about that. Now, you could argue that that was an attempt at strategy on her part in order to mobilize people at a time that would lead to maximum impact on the election, but that failed. So right now she's hedging her bets in the same way. She's waiting. She has supposedly met with Lander and Zohran and is, narrowing her choices. Her people have also said that she might not necessarily make an endorsement, which I don't think will be the case, but they're probably saying that to dispense with the narrative that it's either one or the other. But I think she's going to endorse. I think it's relatively obvious that she's going to endorse Zohran, but I think she needs to do it soon. And the other thing to consider here is that she did lose her DSA endorsement. And I don't think she's the type who's going to split with the socialist wing in general because of that, but I do think it'll be a good indication. Lander is the other candidate who supposedly she's meeting with, and he has a lot of similar positions to Zohran, but just more moderate in terms of not wanting to take a fully government-run approach to things like solving the housing crisis, or just hedging a little bit more than Zohran does, in which case Zohran is willing to blaze ahead on these issues. So it's the dynamic between any actual socialist, democratic socialist, leftist progressive versus a more quote-unquote moderate Democrat. I think Lander is genuinely more moderate, but still I think that the choice that AOC is presented with here is, are you going to stand with the socialist wing of the party on principle, despite the fact that the socialist wing of the party is not currently offering you an endorsement, not that she needs it at the moment, but over her stance on Israel, and essentially I think there was a video call that she did related to the new definition of anti-Semitism, which includes in some cases criticism of Israel. And what that does is it allows people to tally any types of protests in favor of Palestine and that sort of thing as hate crimes, essentially. Not like in terms of federal law, but in terms of when you hear certain statistics about. So it's bad for anybody who cares about anti-Semitism, because you're not getting an accurate read on anti-Semitic incidents that are actually occurring if you are counting completely valid criticism of Israel. So AOC defended that definition of anti-Semitism. It was a vote that, for whatever reason, she felt she had to make. And so she lost her endorsement with DSA because of that. I could not explain her logic to you on that, but I do think, like I said, I think who she endorses, whether she endorses in this race, will be a good litmus test to, are we seeing her actually wanting to take a different tack from the socialist wing of the Democratic Party? Is she going to try to carve out some different type of moderate progressive space, even as she's going on this, tour against oligarchs? It seems unlikely, given that she is teaming up with Bernie, but, we'll see. It does raise eyebrows a little bit that she's dragging her feet on this endorsement, but hopefully she times it right. Her track record hasn't been good for that. I do feel like she's going to endorse Zohran, and if she's going to, she should get on it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. Posting all kinds of content there, like book reviews, movie reviews, music. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of that's posted there. Plus my EPs. I just dropped a new EP called Dead Internet Theory that's available on all streaming platforms, and that was available first for members only. So if you want access to that, become a member. And if there's other stuff that you'd like to see as members only content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.